Hello, my name is Kylie Brockman, and I am doing my presentation, my honors capstone topic on adverse childhood experiences. So the topic is adverse childhood experiences. It can also be called ACEs. So if you hear me use the word ACE, it also refers to the same exact thing. Before getting into my ideas and my research on this, I just wanted to first start out by kind of explaining what adverse childhood experiences are. And so, like the title has in it, childhood. So these are experiences that somebody incurs between the ages of 0 and 18. And the reason I want to look into this is just because these can impact somebody past the age of 18. And I'll kind of get more into that later. But first, I just, like I said, wanted to explain what they are. So these experiences can really be anything from abuse, neglect, to household dysfunction. In abuse, we commonly just think of physical abuse, but this also includes emotional, mental, or sexual abuse. Neglect is also emotional or physical neglect. And then household dysfunction is kind of one that surprised me the most when I was learning about these. So obviously when we think of adverse experiences that somebody incurs, I usually think of either an abuse or neglect. So those are the biggest things we hear about. Abuse is easier to pinpoint because a lot of times if it's like physical, there's proof of it on somebody, and so that's the one that we tend to see about more because somebody sometimes doesn't have to talk about it as much because you can see the abuse on their body. But household dysfunction would be something like parents divorcing, somebody in the house that is using substances, whether that's drug or alcohol, somebody in their family being incarcerated, somebody close to them dying, somebody that they know in their family being treated violently, so not them themselves, but witnessing, like maybe their dad is mistreating their mom or mom's doing the same to dad, something along those lines. So they're witnessing that. And then mental illnesses as well. So those are those are examples of what an adverse experience would be for a child. And then impacts of those, there's kind of a wide range of impacts. The main ones, like I said, when it comes to something like abuse, you tend to see injuries, but this can also be trauma to the brain, so it's causing traumatic stress to the brain. From seeing things like the household dysfunctions or being neglected emotionally or being emotionally abused. So there's kind of that range, that first step of when an experience like this happens, you have the physical trauma, the physical injuries on you. Another thing is depression and anxiety, and this is something that they're starting to learn more about just because the field itself of depression and anxiety is something that's been unknown for a while just because there hasn't been a lot of research done. And so we're learning more about it itself, so it's been harder to connect it to ACEs specifically. But that is one thing. Also something like PTSD, especially because this is happening for a young child. The higher an ACE score is, they've also linked that to more suicidal thoughts in a person. Another thing can also be drug and alcohol or substance abuse later on in their life, and then even chronic diseases has been linked to higher ACE scores. They haven't, in a lot of the research I've done, they have not said specific exact chronic diseases that are attached to ACEs. The big ones they pointed out are cancer and diabetes, but there isn't like this is the exact chronic disease that links to adverse childhood experiences. So that one's a little bit harder to learn more about because there are so many chronic diseases and things that can come of having a childhood experience like this. But like I said, diabetes, cancer, those are two ones. Also, HIV and STDs are something that occur as well, just because, like I said before, substance abuse is something. So children become sexually active, and this is all just a way for them to kind of look for freedom or an escape from what's happening in their life, and so that's why they kind of end up abusing these things instead of using them in a more responsible way. And then also another thing, and this is a big thing for me as a future educator, is education and occupation future careers are impacted just because, like I said, these students are using substances, they're incurring chronic diseases, so it becomes harder for them to, see a goal in education, see a goal in a career. So that's something else that becomes impacted as well. And like I said, This isn't the exact everything. You can never pinpoint something like an experience and say this is exactly the only thing that falls under adverse childhood experiences, but these are the most common and kind of the generalized version of it. So next I kind of wanted to talk about the methodologies of finding this, because it is kind of a personal topic for people. So the biggest thing used is surveys and a questionnaire. And I did mention something, I said higher ACE score. What that means is the main questionnaire that they've used for ACE, or adverse childhood experiences, is basically a list of questions. If you answer yes to it, you get a point. And these are questions dealing with those experiences, like have you had someone in your family incarcerated, have you seen somebody abused, kind of those. I won't get too into them or word for word because they can get kind of in depth of questions, but you get the general idea. They basically just ask about the experience, and so the more yes you're saying, the more experiences you've said you've had in your life. And so that's why they're saying the higher the ACE score, the more likely these impacts are going to happen to them. Surveys is another thing, just because the questionnaire is limited to the questions that they've created, and so sometimes for a main goal of a research they want to ask more questions. The hard thing, like I said, with these two are this topic is personal, and these adverse experiences are personal, and they're hard to talk about sometimes for people. So these aren't super reliable, and that's not because people, are like, oh, I'm going to keep this information from you. It's just hard to talk about. And sometimes when something occurs like this, we have a flight or fight response. And I think sometimes a lot of people's response is that they want to push these experiences from their brain. They don't want to have to deal with them. Why they have, substance abuse, that happens more with these people with higher ACE scores. So sometimes it's hard to get the real facts on these. For the most part, they do well. But like I said, as I've done my research, I personally have felt that these are a little hard. But they're trying to learn more ways to understand ACEs. And one is doing more testing neurologically and with blood tests for anxiety and depression. Like I said, anxiety and depression is something we're overall learning more about. So this side of testing itself is becoming a little harder, but we're coming to learn how to do it more. So that's something, because these neurological tests can help us understand somebody's level of anxiety, toxic stress that their brain is incurring, or depression that they're feeling. And a lot of current studies, like I said, show how these higher ACE scores are affecting health. One of the other ones I didn't mention in the impacts before was toxic stress. This is a stress level that affects someone's physical and emotional well-being. They're trying to do more screening for anxiety and or depression that's linked to childhood trauma. Those who experienced trauma in their youth were at a near double risk for chronic diseases than those who weren't exposed. And a lot with higher ACE scores do tend to have suicidal thoughts. So those are some of the more in-depth kind of health impacts at the age. So for me, why I want to do this topic. When I first looked at this, I wanted to look at it at just a general elementary or secondary, because I'm planning to be a middle school teacher. But then I realized that a lot of the research, and this is a newer field, but a lot of the research that is happening is already within those. And so I wanted to look at college students. Being in a college, understanding it right now and kind of where I'm at, I wanted to learn from other students. So my plan is to basically survey students and survey faculty. The reason I want to survey students is because I want to understand their perspective better. I'm personally someone who doesn't have that high of an ACE score, and so I wanted to learn more about students who did, and how they feel as a college student, and how they feel the college is helping them. There's a big word that they use for this topic as well. It's called resilience, hopefully a word you've heard of before. Essentially, students who have these higher ACE scores or really have an ACE score tend to build up a resilience to things sometimes, and that's just their ability to kind of push past these things and continue forward. And so I wanted to learn students who have a higher ACE score, how they've been able to make it to college, how they're doing in college, because I feel like those are almost two different battles, getting to college and then staying and finishing college. And SUU has a lot of great resources, but I want to learn from their perspective, because that's just my personal opinion. I want to learn from their perspective if they feel that those are enough resources, what else we could do. And then faculty, the biggest reason I want to do that is because something on the teacher end of this is it's called trauma-informed training. Essentially what this is it's training teachers to understand these ACEs better, and to understand how they can help their students. And so I want to learn if faculty feel that this is something that would help them here at SUU. Continue to be better professors, continue to understand this topic better, in ways that would help them help these students. So that's just kind of my general idea about all of this. I feel it's a very important topic, and it's like I've kind of been saying throughout it is a general or a newer field, and so I feel like there's a lot of research that can be done and a lot of improvement. So it's a really exciting time to kind of jump in on it.